Haley is currently pursuing a doctorate in leadership psychology with a focus on neuroleadership at William James College in Massachusetts. As an experienced strategist and consultant focused on innovation, creativity, and behavioral science, Haley builds on a rich blend of academic and applied experiences across business, psychology, behavioral science, and the culinary world. Having worked across hospitality and journalism contexts widely, Haley has developed a unique understanding of customer experience and communication. Haley, as we will shortly see for ourselves, is passionate about exploring the neuroscience behind creativity, especially how brain mechanisms shape innovative thinking and how behavioral science and continuous learning principles can be applied to enhance it, both individually and within organizations.
So it wasn't until my mid-30s that I actually went to grad school. It was the pandemic. I don't know if anyone else did a huge pandemic pivot, but that was my existence at the time. And I realized that creativity wasn't just artistic ability. It actually was more in, for at least for me, how do we see the world? How do we ask questions? How do we tackle various challenges? And I realized that creativity was more. So imagine if we could bottle this kind of creativity, the ability to innovate, solve problems, seemingly unconnected ideas suddenly become connections. So what if this creativity wasn't a skill, or was a skill, but not, can you tell I'm dyslexic, guys? What if creativity wasn't a thing that you were just born with, but more like a skill or a muscle that you could develop? I haven't done a presentation in ages, guys. I'll be very honest. Let me be clear. The type of creativity I'm talking about isn't what brought you these types of things. That's not the creativity that I have, nor the type of creativity that I'm an expert in. I'm talking about more the things that lead to this. Although, to be fair, probably both types of creativity were used together. The brain processes do have a lot of overlap. So looking at the brain, it's not going to go too crazy here. So you've got the amygdala. That's an important one. That is used in both types, as well as the hippocampus, which you see a lot. So the amygdala you'll get for more emotional processing. The hippocampus you see really for memory. They both also use a few different networks that are really all around the brain. So you've got the executive control network, which is, processes and things like that. You've got the default mode network, which is active during mind wandering, and then the salience network. And that really helps us filter and remember what's actually important. I'll go more into them in a minute, but anyone familiar with these guys? I love Sherlock. I think it's a great show. So that is Sherlock and Watson. So think of these guys when I'm talking about these next couple ideas. Sherlock Holmes is known for his ability to see connections that no one else sees. His mind is always at work, which is part of the best part of the show, when you see all those little details popping up, even when he seems to not be doing anything at all. Meanwhile, Watson, he's super practical and methodical. He brings structure and focus to their adventures and try to bring Holmes's wild ideas back into some sort of scope of reality. So the default mode network, or the DMN, which I just mentioned a few minutes ago, that is like the Sherlock Holmes of the brain. It's where the process of idea generation really happens, where creativity thrives in an open state of exploration and spontaneous thinking. Holmes's talent for making unexpected connections, his gift, it really mirrors how we generate ideas during moments of reflection or daydreaming. It's an essential component of creativity. The DMN is always working in the background, and it's responsible for those aha moments you have in the shower, or when you figure out a solution to a problem when you're driving or walking or doing something completely unrelated. Meanwhile, you've got Watson, and he really reflects the executive control network, or the ECN, and its ability to focus and evaluate options. It really reflects the process of selecting and refining ideas. The ECN is housed in the prefrontal cortex and is generally responsible for things like planning, time management, follow through. If anyone here has ADHD, like I do, you've probably been told you have poor executive function. That basically means that Watson is snoozing on the job. For instance, if it's not my calendar, it doesn't exist. If someone doesn't tell me what time how much time has passed, I'm incredibly time blind and I have no idea. These are just little things that, for instance, I experience. All Watson. Got those guys right there. So then there's the salience network, an important network that helps regulate these two internal systems is the salience network. Think of it like a switchboard. Holmes and Watson each have their own station, and they're each trying kind of to have their own ideas of things. So the salience network acts kind of like an operator where it decides which network to bring to the forefront. Also, for people with ADHD, they actually can function at the same time, which is part of why we get distracted so easily and experience hyperfocus on the most random things. But generally speaking, the salience network can kick in and tell us what we should be doing and what's important. So when you think about Holmes coming in and having all these ideas and then passing it off to Watson, that's the salience network going, okay, guys, let's bring our attention back into focus. So typically our brain can ignore all the various bits of noise. We observe and take in so much data and stimulus throughout the day that our latent inhibition basically comes through and says, hey, that's not important, or that is important. It just kind of buzzes around back there. But some people experience a decreased latent inhibition, which basically means their filter is a lot more porous than other people's. So people with a decreased latent inhibition, they've kind of a lazy salience network a little bit, and it means that everything is of equal importance. Obviously not everything, but to a certain degree, a lot of things are of much more equal importance. This is really where that line between creative genius and maybe insanity kicks into play, because too much input, or rather a too far decreased latent inhibition, causes psychosis. It's one of those little things you have to kind of remember. So how can you get Sherlock and Watson to really help you? When brainstorming, we've all done it. You know, there's lots of new ideas, new products that you're trying to do, a new solution for something. We've all heard that expression, there are no bad ideas. We all know there are bad ideas. There are terrible ideas. There are lots and lots of really, really awful ideas. So we have a tendency to, when we are brainstorming, just instantly go into judgment mode, where we think of an idea and go, oh no, that's really dumb. Or, oh no, that could never happen. So I'm gonna ask you to really try in the future to not judge your ideas at this stage. When you're first starting to brainstorm, I really want you to try to just let all those ideas go forward. Because what the best ideas sometimes and often are third generation down or more from that really, really terrible idea. You just haven't figured out how to refine it yet. And that's part of the process. So Sherlock, our default mode network, this is where divergent thinking really kicks in. So that's all of those ideas. That is the wild range of possibilities. That's the floodgates opening to creativity in your mind. There's no constraints, and the DMN really shines. It really encourages free association and the connection of seemingly unrelated concepts. So we know that being told now, be creative, really sucks and doesn't work, basically. So what you can do is start to set up situations and environments to promote this kind of thinking. So the first thing I always recommend to people, let your mind wander. Daydreaming, it's actually not that bad of a thing. It exercises the part of your brain that likes to think about these types of things. When the DMN really works is when you're not actually focused. In fact, that's how they found it. It was when someone was lying in an MRI machine just waiting in between tasks, and they noticed that parts of the brain were lighting up in ways that they didn't anticipate. So if you are trying to do something and you realize that you're starting to kind of wander, let yourself wander. Go do something else, something that occupies your mind but isn't connected directly to what you're trying to do. And bonus points if it's something physical. So coloring books are a really great way to kind of let the DMN just kind of spin out and do its thing for a while. Also, going for a walk, listening to music, or listening to a podcast or a book that's completely unrelated. Your brain just starts to kind of percolate in the background. Also, mixing teams. So by having really diverse teams, we all know that diversity leads to more kind of creative things, because different backgrounds lead to different ideas and different solutions. So that's another really interesting way of being able to get the default mode network to kind of start putting things together. And then explore ideas. So for instance, Google, they have everybody have a 20% time allowance that they go work on other projects. And this is how a lot of their most innovative projects have come into play. So for instance, Gmail came from a product like this. Also an interesting thing that with the mixed teams and with exploring ideas, often the most innovative ideas come from outside whatever scope the person is working in. So that's part of why Elon Musk was able to do so many interesting, innovative things, or Marie Curie was able to find radium. They didn't know what was impossible by going into these industries. Therefore, anything and everything was possible. So that's a really interesting way to kind of approach how we look at things. So good old Watson. He is looking after convergent thinking. So once you've got all these really, really terrible ideas, you need to start narrowing the focus and figure out which ones of them actually make sense, are useful, and novel. The definition of innovation is often useful and novel, because one or the other, it's really the sweet spot together that you want to try to hit. So when you're filtering out these ideas, it really helps to look at what are your strategic goals? What are you trying to go towards? So using tools like a decision matrix, which is where you assign values of importance to various things. And that really causes you to say, like, for instance, if I'm going shopping, it's super important for me to have yogurt, because yogurt and granola is my snack. That will keep me kind of sane. But it's not really important for me to get orange juice, because I don't drink orange juice every day, but I probably eat yogurt every day. So that has a higher scale of importance, just as an example. Similarly, you can kind of see a SWOT analysis sort of falls into the same sort of category when you're evaluating ideas. What's really interesting is Boeing actually used a combination of the decision matrix and the SWOT when they're looking at new suppliers to come in, where they kind of try to decide, like, is there cost or reliability or delivery times or weights? These are the different things that they rank when making decisions. Also, another really great tool is affinity analysis, where when you've got lots of ideas, you can start clumping them into groups that have similarities. And once you start to see patterns and trends, you can say, oh, do all of these things, what do they all have in common? And can that become just one thing? Can we refine it? Is this one idea that can connect to this other cluster? Or should they separate and become their own individual ideas? So focus stacking. Focus stacking is really fun. It's a new area kind of research of looking at how to play with these two different types of attention. So a way to kind of play with these is when you have a project, you first kind of spend some time broadly talking about the subject or the problem. This isn't when you're trying to get ideas yet. You are just refamiliarizing your brain with what you will be paying attention to. After 20 minutes or so, go off, do something else, let your default mode network recharge, and then come back. And that's where the really, the quantity, not quality, show up. This is where you want to have all of the bad ideas, all of them. Think of the what, not the how. That is this stage. And once you start to kind of feel that you're sort of petering, but not completely brain dead, go off again and let the default mode network recharge. After about 20 minutes, come back, and you can start refining and go back and forth between these two, consciously having focused and unfocused time. But try to keep these time blocks, the stacking as it were, around 20 to 30 minutes, because there's been research that shows after about 20 minutes, our brain starts to kind of get a bit fatigued and our cognition isn't quite what it should be. So you probably all remember these guys, or if you don't, they're awesome. There's Peter Pan and Winnie the Pooh. So I'm using these guys to kind of represent some of the neurotransmitters. They are the little chemical messengers that pass on information in your brain about what it's supposed to be doing and feeling at different times. Obviously, they have a great impact on how we think. So Peter Pan, that's dopamine. So he's always seeking new adventures, always in action, movement, excitement. He loves to find new ideas and new experiences that bring him joy. That's Peter Pan's endless energy. Dopamine we experience when we try something new or when we achieve something. It's that It's often called like the motivation messenger, because that is really kind of what you feel. So if you want to try to encourage Peter Pan to come and hang out with you, here's an obvious start is to set up goals that are actually achievable. I've seen a lot of places where they set these crazy goals, especially if there's a bonus involved, that just isn't realistic. And that sets off your dopamine actually on the back foot, because your brain knows that's not actually achievable. So you kind of give up before you even start. You also might want to set up workflows and systems that provide lots of little dopamine hits, like breadcrumbs that lead towards the finish line. So this means breaking up a large task into lots of smaller tasks. So every time you finish something small, you get a little dopamine hit. And that also means that you can't procrastinate till the very end. Again, I'm time blind. I have no idea how long things are going to take. So it's really important for me to be able to break things up into small chunks, because it's more fun that way. Another example is I have a water bottle that's only 17 ounces. It's a lot smaller instead of these giant jugs that you see people carrying around these days, because I get that dopamine hit every time I empty a bottle. So I'm going to get 3 or 4 of those a day. And that's so much easier and more rewarding than once or twice. Just makes it more fun. It's gamifying, basically. Also, new experiences in general. And that can be something really, really simple, just like taking a new route home when you're walking back from wherever you were, or, trying something, a new food, like really like baby things, small steps can get that little dopamine surge, which is awesome. So serotonin is Winnie the Pooh. So he is calm and content, and he enjoys life's simple pleasures. That's serotonin, which really helps regulate our mood, promoting feelings of happiness and stability. So Pooh likes to savor his honey. Serotonin likes us to appreciate the moment and be calm and have emotional balance. Our brains also treat serotonin as a reward. We all like feeling calm, just having that Zen feeling, think flow. That is really serotonin doing its thing. So most of the ways to get serotonin to come out, they're really much more personal. It's less structured. It's released through activities like social connection, mindfulness, exercise, activities that force you to really be in the here and now. So you can also get a boost from sunlight and nature. So for instance, a great way to boost your serotonin is to go for a walk outside in the sun, around trees, maybe with people that you're talking to. Like this can go really well for little breaks within the focus stacking that I had just mentioned before. And one last huge serotonin kick is honestly just really good sleep. When your brain is really tired, it doesn't have extra energy to spare on trying to be creative and happy. Also, low sleep deprivation can lead to low serotonin receptor activity, which also then leads to low melatonin, which is one of the things that helps you on the road to sleep. So it becomes this really vicious cycle. So get good sleep, guys. I highly recommend it. So quickly, neuroplasticity. At the start of this talk, I really wanted to reframe this as creativity is a muscle rather than a skill. So we didn't really have solid proof of this until like around 2000, but obviously before that, people started to realize that the brain did develop. The prefrontal cortex, for example, doesn't develop until you finish developing until your mid-20s. So teenagers literally don't have their full brain. Suddenly high school makes so much more sense. When in the 1960s, they started to kind of experiment and started to realize that people are learning things. So how can we help encourage that process to happen? So neuroplasticity is the process of neurons rebuilding. So think like a city that is constantly building new roads and new pathways. It's ever changing. Neuroplasticity allows us to think outside the box, to adapt to new challenges, and really integrate fresh ideas into old existing ones. It is that continually shifting city or path through a maze, and maze really, it's all of our thoughts. It helps us figure these things out. So a strategy to be able to do that is really for, I just lost my train. There you go. So the way to do that is really just to challenge yourself. As anyone knows, if you've been sore from a workout, you have to stress the body a little bit for it to grow. And similarly, if you challenge your brain, it will continue to grow. And as you grow, you'll be able to adapt more, and it just gets better and better. Brains, it's great. So anyone who, whoa, my notes aren't here. There we go. This note is supposed to be on the last thing. I'm so sorry. First off, brains, think of it like the cloud storage. Inevitably, there's going to be a technical glitch. There had to be. Cloud storage, but your brain. I don't know if anyone experiences this. How can your storage be full on your phone? Because you have a million pictures of cats or plants or things that look exactly the same. Your brain can be a little bit like that too. I often say my brain has too many tabs open. I actually have a sticker of this exact image on my water bottle to kind of remind me to chill out sometimes, which leads us to neurogenesis. So neurogenesis is when our brains straight up develop new neurons, which is really cool, primarily in the hippocampus, which is the region that we do a lot of learning and memory. So think about adding more storage to your phone or to the cloud. Similarly with your brain, if you add more neurons, you have more availability. Like these shiny neurons are similar to babies in that they are really flexible and resilient. So they are super sensitive to stimuli, which means they're ready to connect and learn lots of new things, which is really, really, really fun. It's alive. I mean, our brains are actually doing things all the time that we don't even realize. The more I learn about brains, the more I want to learn. So obviously, no thing of the future talking about brains, means we can't. No conversation about brains isn't complete without looking at the future and neurotech. So really fast. Some of the future, people think we're going to be having little things implanted in our brains. What I just want to talk about, since this is a huge field, is really devices that are available to anyone and are purely external. So not like a Neuralink or anything like that. There's huge potential here to unlock creativity by leveraging our natural processes to be able to identify focus and peak times and areas for growth. So mainly a lot of the devices I'm going to talk about are used for anxiety and depression and ADHD, but they also have potential for cognitive development. So the Mendy is one of the first ones I want to talk about. It's like a gym for your brain. It uses FNIRS, NFIRS, is that how we are calling them these days? Because the full names are always too hard, to monitor activity right in your prefrontal cortex. So that's, good old Watson doing his thing. So what they do is they have a gamified app where if you see in this image, it is a little ball that moves by detecting brain flow or blood flow. So when you have more blood flow going through, you're able to strengthen those parts of your brain. Science is really, really awesome. And this kind of neurofeedback helps improve concentration, manage stress, unlock creative potential. So Neurable is another one. They use EEGs. They have 12 EEG sensors kind of right there in the headphone. I'm actually working on another project with these. We're on a project with these guys right now, and I can't wait to get my hands on a set of these because they sound so cool. They track brainwaves with the EEG technology. So they really focus on what your optimal focus ability is. So for instance, they give you a focus score, and it will tell you like, hey, you're not really concentrating that much. You might want to take a small break right now. Because we've all had those times where you're just staring at a screen or a page, you have to read it like 5 times before you get any information. Neurable theoretically can tell you, yeah, you just take a break. You're not getting anything done right now. So also Plato Science, they're based in Denmark. I believe so is Mendy. They are at least Scandinavian. So the thing about Plato work from Plato Science is that they actually use DTCS, which is stimulation, and they gently nudge the prefrontal cortex with a low electrical current, which really boosts neuroplasticity. So this kind of thing, it's really very much in its early stages. A lot of it hasn't been completely certified. What's really interesting is when I first started talking to Plato Science, to their founder, he said that they were marketing this as a cognitive device, but if you look at it, they actually really only talk about the anti-anxiety and mental health elements of it because it gets rated as a different type of device, even though it still has the exactly same function. So at the end of the day, creativity isn't just an elusive spark that comes and goes. It's a skill that we can cultivate, and we've got the science to prove it, which is awesome. So our brains are wired with the capacity for extraordinary ideas. But these ideas don't happen in isolation. You need to have a balance between the different networks and structures in your brain, as well as being able to tease out Peter Pan and Pooh Bear whenever you can to help make the experience fun. So what are you guys going to be doing? What mindset shifts are you going to look at? What structural changes are you going to look at, either in your environment or your routine? What risks are you willing to take? Because obviously that has to be part of the experience. That's all I have for you right now. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, I will try my best to answer them.